Welcome to the Champs App podcast, where we help players and parents demystify the world of minor hockey development and recruiting for both girls and boys. On this special episode, as the current 2021 season ends and plans for next season get underway, we discuss girls' tryouts. And to help us prepare, we have former U.S. national team player and current coach with the Carolina Junior Hurricanes girls program, Alyssa Gagliardi. We discuss how to research which club or team to try out for, how to get ready for tryouts, and what to do during tryouts. Whether you are a player or a parent, this is a great discussion, and I hope you enjoy it. Before we get to our guest, if you enjoyed this episode and want us to keep making more of them, please share it with teammates and friends. You can also subscribe, like, follow, and even better, it would be great if you would leave us a review. Now, let's drop the puck and get to the show. Welcome to the Champs App podcast. On this special edition of the Champs App podcast, we're going to talk about preparing for tryouts for girls travel hockey teams. And I'm very excited to have a special guest to help us provide some insights and advice. We have Alyssa Gagliardi from the Carolina Junior Hurricanes girls program. Alyssa has competed and been a winner at every level of hockey, including Shattuck St. Mary's, Cornell University, the CWHL, the NWHL, and of course, the U.S. national team. Welcome to the podcast, Alyssa.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Hey, so usually I ask everybody about their hockey history, but you've done this before on other podcasts and other areas, so I'm not going to, spend too much time on that. I'm going to more tell folks if they want to go listen to it, just Google your name for a podcast and they can listen to it elsewhere. But what are you doing these days? Are you officially retired as a player? And obviously I know you're working with the Junior Hurricanes girls program, but what are you up to these days?
Yeah, it's a lot of excitement around here. Yes, I don't play competitively anymore. I've kind of made the transition into coaching, which if you would ask me maybe 10 years ago, I probably had no interest in coaching when I was done playing, but I've really come to enjoy it. So I help coach. I'm the associate head coach for the Carolina Junior Hurricanes U19 girls AAA team down here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I also work for the Carolina Hurricanes organization as girls and women's hockey specialist. So help a lot with just the general youth hockey, promoting the game down here, but specifically I get to kind of lead and coordinate a lot of events for girls and women in the area to grow the game.
And you have some big news with the Carolina girls program. You want to share some of that news of what's going on with the program this year coming up?
Yeah. The Junior Hurricanes, we got the move from AA to AAA, so we are now a Tier 1 program at the U19 level. So that'll be our second team. We're also Tier 1 at U14 for the girls as well. So it's a good step. It's all part of the kind of growing process where we hope to become a really competitive organization in USA hockey.
And of course, this weekend, and by the time this airs, it'll be just this past weekend, the national championships for USA Hockey are taking place. So that means people's seasons are ending and tryouts are beginning. Are you preparing for tryouts?
Yeah, definitely. It's our tryout date actually getting the Tier 1 status moved up about a month. So we've had a little bit of a shorter timeline to kind of prepare and get some things in order than a typical season, but we're really excited about it. It does come up quick, especially for those kids that are going to be at nationals this week. It's a pretty quick turnaround to figure out, look ahead to next season already, but we're really excited about it.
That's awesome. All right. So before we get into, actual tryouts, let's talk about your personal story do you have any good tryout stories?
I guess it's just kind of interesting in terms of, getting cut. We all get cut at some point, right? And we had just moved down to North Carolina when I was about 10, and I was a goalie at the time, actually. So I played goalie one year, and then I tried out for goalie the next year for boys, and I got cut. They had already had their two goalies picked. So my only option really was to become a skater again, which I had started out as, a forward, and the only option, because tryouts were all done for teams, and my option was to play on a girls U16 team at age 11, and it was the only all girls team in the entire, from Virginia down to South Carolina. And so I changed out to skater, changed back to defense, and kind of never looked back really. So it's kind of funny how I was into goalie and I was enjoying it, but it just wasn't going to work out at that time, and so I made this switch, and I think definitely for the best long term in terms of my love of the game and being able to stay in it and reach, the levels I have.
And when was the last time you were cut as a skater?
It's funny, the USA Hockey national camps. So even, 14, 15, 16, I got cut every year except my last year of eligibility.
Wow.
And I think they've changed a little bit, but the Southeast, they used to send one forward and one defenseman for the whole Southeast region. And I was never the one defenseman in my age group. It was kind of the same kids every year. And so it wasn't until my going into my senior year that I got to go to USA Hockey National Camp finally. And it ended up working out where Cornell ended up being there. You get lucky, but I tell kids like they're not the be all end all, right? Like those camps, you want to go, you want to compete against the best kids, and every year it just kind of lit my fire a little bit more to prove I deserve to be there. And year after year, you kind of get no, you didn't make it, no, you didn't make it. But obviously, getting to make it that last year was really good. And then, obviously, the U.S. national team program is quite competitive. So definitely got a couple calls throughout my time with that, hey, you didn't make it. And so plenty of those stories as well.
That's good. But they at least gave you feedback every time when you didn't make the cut.
Yeah, and definitely at that level, it's I remember a coach is saying like it's so paper thin at the top what differentiates one player from the next, and sometimes it's what they're looking for in a certain tournament, or just who kind of was really good at that camp. So they definitely give you feedback. They try and make sure you have a direction to focus on for next time. But yeah, it's obviously just a competitive level at that point.
Gotcha. Now, obviously, at the youth or the girls hockey level, the tryouts are very different than at the national camp level. Obviously, you went through that as a kid, and now you're experiencing it on the other side as a coach. Overall, what do you think are the pros and cons of just any tryout process?
I think one of the aspects is you see kids for 2 or 3 ice sessions, and some kids are really great tryout players, and some kids aren't, and it's not really always a good representation of how they are over the course of a season. So it's a limited window, and even tryouts, you're just watching kids on the ice. You don't get a lot of time to get to know who they are as people, what they, feel, how they think about what commitment really means, or, depending on your level, and, what are their off ice habits and things like that. So obviously it's just a really small glimpse of who the player is as a person and an athlete, but it's kind of just the nature of the beast to try and evaluate kids and do it in a pretty short time frame.
Gotcha. All right, so let's get into this. And obviously, everything that we're going to talk about is going to depend on the age group, because trying out for a squirt team, 8, 9, 10 team versus a bantam or a midget team, 16 AAA or 19 AAA, very different. But how do you feel about spring tryouts versus fall tryouts? Because obviously USA Hockey has some reasons to be doing it in the spring, but obviously we saw with COVID, tryouts actually were happening later in the year. Do you feel that actually waiting until the fall might be a good choice for tryouts?
Yeah, I think for a lot of age groups, it probably would be better in the fall. You look at nationals happening in 48 hours, kids are flying to try out. Like, when did they have time to put in some off ice training, work on skill development, different things, and just mature, right, over the course of 3, 4, 5 months. So I think there's definitely a lot of advantages, I think, to pushing it back. That being said, at our U19 level, with the model we have kids coming in from different parts of the country with billeting and things like that. It actually is a little advantageous for us to do ours earlier, simply to be able to coordinate a lot of the logistics, get the kids all on the same workout program, and different things like that at that age. So that's kind of the 16 to 19 age range, but pretty much anything other than, I think 14 and younger, probably it would definitely benefit to move it later, August or something like that, just to, again, give those kids time to work on things and improve and get stronger, get faster, more athletic. And you need time to do that.
Yeah, and you can see a big difference in 3 or 4 months, not in 2 or 3 weeks in players. The downside to it is you want kids, not just playing hockey 52 weeks a year.
Exactly. That's another thing, right? It becomes
a
a year-round thing, and then we're not really creating better athletes at that point. We're just overuse,
Yeah,
could never get away from the game and never get a fresh perspective because they're just in it 24/7.
Yeah, so I'm with you. What you've seen is very similar to what I've seen. Is at younger ages, pushing it back to the fall probably could make more sense, so long as that they're not, on the ice every day over the summer and not playing any other sports. So, great. So, especially at the younger ages, how do you start thinking about playing boys versus girls versus potentially playing both? Because in a lot of areas, other than maybe Chicago, Detroit, and maybe Boston, there's
only one club that you can play on for girls, but there's many clubs that they can play on with boys. And I know you've talked about this previously of when do you start, making the transition from boys to girls, but how do you think about boys versus girls versus playing both, especially in the younger ages?
Yeah, I think at the younger ages, I mean, especially, there's not much size difference. Girls are actually probably growing a little faster at the, 8, 9, 10 age. So I really encourage kind of both in terms of, just getting to play against different kids of different strengths and sizes and all these different things. And, I think boys are just naturally a little bit more aggressive. So you kind of learn that a little bit earlier on. So, but I think, yeah, finding that balance, right? Everyone, every kid is different. Some kids are going to love it for the social aspect, and maybe that's that's the most important thing to them. So being with their friends is first and foremost, and other kids are going to maybe more like the on ice part, and they're going to be looking for something different. So I think for any parent, I just say your kid best, and I think just evaluate the options, make sure they're having fun first and foremost. And then kind of look at the options in terms of what are they enjoying most about it? Do they just love being on the ice regardless of who's out there, or are they kind of more like the before and after and being with their friends and just having a good time that way? And there's hockey's a lifelong sport, so there's no right or wrong to that.
Yeah, and I believe until you have a national commitment, which is when you're 14, you can play on both boys and girls at AA or AAA level for both teams up until you're 14.
Yeah, exactly. I know down here we like our U10 girls and stuff, they play in the house league against all boys teams. So they're a girls team, but they're in a boys league. So that's kind of a good balance as well.
That's great. That's great. So, and then how do you think about if your kid is kind of on the cusp between being a travel player versus playing house league? How do you start thinking about whether or not you should try out for a travel team?
Yeah, I think again, it kind of depends on maybe the age group, and obviously travel automatically increases the commitment in terms of cost and time and all these other factors. But I think it's does your kid want that increased commitment level? I think playing house, there's nothing bad about that, right? They're on the ice, they're getting games in, and then I think the big thing I think would be especially if you're even considering it, I'd say kind of like almost why not try out if it's a good if it's the right fit for the family, just because who knows, right? If your kind of kid might make it, might not, then you might as well try it. If they make it, great. If not, then hey, there's another option and they can continue to develop and they're not that far off. So yeah, I think the biggest thing is probably just kind of being realistic about where you think your kid might be at, and maybe talking to the coaches or things like that of what it is. But I think knowing that the increased commitment level does require that extra time, money, all these things that definitely changes the picture a little bit.
And you lead right into my next question, which is around how do you start figuring out what the right level to try out is? Because if your kid played either high level of house league, should they be trying out for the AAA team next year? If they're how do you start figuring out what's the right level to try out? And then is it better to be kind of the best player on a weaker team, or an average player on an average team, or the worst player on a good team?
Yeah, again, I think some of it comes down to the type of kid. And we're even on the girls side, for example, we're seeing some kids that they're trying to make the jump from U14 girls to our U19 program, and it's a big jump, right? And so it's, well, hey, you're not gonna you'll probably be a lower line in terms of you're not gonna get as much playing time special teams. So is it better to be U16 and just be more dominant and touch the puck more and build that confidence and things like that? Some kids are confident and they they'll be fine, it won't really affect them. They'll put their head down and work. But other ones are gonna kind of start to be like, oh, I don't play much, I don't play power play, I don't play penalty kill, and that can really affect the kid's confidence long term. So I think being able to play more is usually the right opportunity. Just again, that's where you're going to see the development. When you're sitting on the bench or chasing the puck around all game, it's not that fun. But again, the social aspect does come in, and what does your kid want in terms of commitment, and are they willing to just kind of maybe take a lesser role to be able to practice with good players and learn and develop, get ice time? Or is it better to kind of have a balance where, hey, they're getting good practices, but they're also playing more? So
yeah,
and there's no right answer, which is the tough part.
Of course. And what advice do you have for parents about thinking of it as in a 1 year increment? Because 1 year can be really good, or it kind of makes no difference as long as you keep pace with everybody else. That 1 year may or may not make a big difference in the big picture of things if you're playing at a lower level versus a higher level.
Yeah, and again, I think depending on the age of the kid, right? Some kids grow a ton in the course of a season, or there's something like that, or some kids just mature or gain strength, or whatever it may be, or just confidence. So, in the grand scheme of things, it's 1 year out of many years playing hockey, hopefully. But I think 1 year can go a long way in terms of kids really. They talk about late bloomers, and a lot of people are late bloomers. That's actually the more of the norm than it
Yeah.
is to be like exceptional. But for some reason, it's the opposite. Everyone thinks the opposite. Like, oh, if my kid didn't make AAA at 9 years old, oh, they're gonna make call. It's like, yeah, they'll be fine. They're 9, but it's hard to. I see how it's easy to fall into that trap.
Yeah, yeah, and it's actually, they're more early bloomers versus everybody's a late bloomer. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So depending on your area, you may or may not have choices on clubs to join. How do you think about it if you do have choices versus if you don't have choices? Like, obviously, where you are, Carolina, not that many options. Where we are in California, there's usually just one club, which is in a reasonable distance away from where you live. So how do you think about that stuff?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, look at the coaches that you're considering. I think you want to obviously you want your kid to have a good experience, and a significant portion of that comes from who the coaches are and how the coaches think about development. Are they going to shorten the bench in September in a 3-2 game in a meaningless tournament, or are they going to challenge kids to figure out those situations and put them in situations that will help them grow by the end of the season? So I think kind of understanding the coaches and their philosophy is a big factor, I would say, when you're looking at different organizations. And then I think the ice time, our girls program, we've evolved where the Unite team, we're on the ice 4 days a week. We have about 4.5 hours of ice time, versus some of the other teams in the Southeast, there are more weekend model teams, which nothing wrong with that. Again, they have kids coming from different areas, so you kind of have to do that. And we've done that for a long time, but we really felt like the development happens during the week and all the ice time and the puck touches and, being in different scenarios and practicing in that versus, kind of being solo on the weekend during the week and then just showing up on the weekend and trying to cram in a lot. So I think the model and the coaches and obviously, just the commitment that each program or organization is expecting.
And so say you have 4 to 6 weeks before tryouts and the club that you're interested, how would you get to know the coach? What are the different ways to actually learn about what you need to know to address those questions that you have about the coaching?
Yeah, I think people would find that, like, if parents reach out to us about questions, we want to answer them, right? Because nobody wants to feel unknown going into it. So if we can at least establish a connection with a phone call or a couple, some emails or things like that, and answer questions about what we prioritize as a program, what are our principles in terms of development, then I think I would encourage parents to reach out. Some coaches may be more responsive than others or whatnot, but I think you can find a lot of coaches' backgrounds on organizations' websites, and you kind of see, like, do their players go to the next level? What is, even talking to people that may have played for that coach in the past, you can kind of, everyone's a little biased based on maybe how their kid did or didn't do, but I think those are, it's valuable insight just to kind of understand, how they run practices, how they consider development, do they talk to the kids about character development and things like that. And it's kind of this, there's a lot of questions I think you can kind of explore and just get a sense of, hey, will my kid find this experience enjoyable and also grow as a player and as a person.
Gotcha. And given these low density, clubs that, might just have enough to form a strong AAA team, how do you think about, our teams already picked before they even show up for tryouts because they've already been with the club before versus, will I get a fair shot at trying out for the team?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So our tryouts last year, granted it was a COVID year, so, kind of a weird one, but, we basically only had to make very few cuts based on the number of people we got tryouts. Whereas this year, we'll be able to be a lot more selective in terms of, whether you're a returner or not, because we've got we've got more kids trying out. So naturally we're able to pick more. So I think, it depends on the organization size, right? I think we've seen here in Raleigh, typically there's always been a place to play, especially on the girls' side, in the organization. But now as it gets more competitive, we're getting these girls that are 8, 9, 10, 11, they're all aging up. And that's where a lot of our, numbers are. They're aging up and it just kind of, as you get older, it gets more competitive. And so we're seeing that growth. And so it's definitely interesting when you go to a tryout, you do look at numbers, right? You look at how many people are trying out, if they're returning or not. But I think it kind of depends on the organization in terms of, are they just going to pick the kids that always make it, or are they willing to kind of shuffle things around to pick the kids that deserve to make the team?
Yeah, and what I've told my kids over the many years of tryouts that they've gone to, the one thing that I've told them, if they're going to a new club or trying out for a new club, they can't be just trying to take a third liner or the fifth or sixth defenseman's place, because they're going to take the player that they already know that they had from last year. You got to get yourself in, on the top two pairings or top two lines if you really want to break through. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always kind of went into tryouts with the mindset of like, I want to make it almost impossible. You want to make it almost impossible for them to cut you, which obviously depends on the situation. But yeah, I would agree. I think sometimes coaches, the instinct is to go who you're familiar with. Again, especially for those last couple spots is, well, we kind of know what we're going to get out of this player. And it's kind of maybe just human nature to do what you know versus take the risk on the unknown. So yeah, I definitely think definitely I encourage kids to try out, like, don't play small, like play big, and make sure you stand out in a really positive way to make sure it's not, that bubble spot, but hey, when push comes to shove, like I've worked my way, like I've earned this spot to be a difference maker.
And also not to be disappointed if you are one of those bubble kids, because they might take somebody that they're more familiar with, and that's okay.
Yeah, and even with the the USA Hockey Tryouts I mentioned, like they took one forward and one D, and those were people within organizations that stayed in this, they played in the Southeast, so they knew them. Whereas I was coming from coming back home from prep school.
Yep.
I never really played girls much down here except 1 year, and so no one really knew me. So again, when you push comes to shove, they pick the ones that they kind of know. They've seen over time. They know they're consistent, whatever. So I get that too, of being like, well, I kind of felt like I deserved that spot, but they go with who they know and who's in the area.
Gotcha. Okay, so now let's talk about, all right, you pick the club and the team and the coach that you want to try out for. How do you prepare, assuming you have 2 to 4 weeks ahead of time to get ready for it?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I think that probably doesn't get talked about enough is the mental preparation. I really encourage kids to write down like their 3 strengths as a player, and then make sure that you're rehearsing those things in terms of, visually see yourself finding success at tryouts a month before you even step on the ice. So I think a lot of kids, maybe they'll skate or, do whatever, do some workouts, but I don't think there's that kind of mental preparation to have that confidence going into tryouts. And I think that is really what separates good players from great players, is ones that they don't play small, they play big, they make sure they stand out with, effort, hustle, playmaking ability, all these different things that, as coaches we're looking for. So I think, if you have 1 week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it is, I think, what are your strengths as a player? And then how do you show those in a tryout? If you have through ice sessions, how are you going to show your speed, your playmaking ability, and your shot? And then actually kind of think through some of those things. And obviously that's maybe more, 14 or older or so, but, I think it just kind of helps ease the nerves a little bit when you head into a tryout. And also too, just knowing, hey, it's good to be nervous, and it means you care. And so if kids aren't nervous, then I'm kind of like, oh, do you think you just automatically make the team? Like you should have a little bit of nerves, even if you're a returner or, you've been on the team for 5 years. It's still a tryout, and there needs to be that preparation to stand out, and again, try and make it as clear as possible to coaches that you're a no-brainer to pick for the team.
And how do you feel about like spending money on like lessons or strength and conditioning during that period of time, or maybe even new equipment that fits you better because you may have grown in the last 9 months since?
I think those are definitely all kind of factors to consider. I think again, it's knowing that the time until tryouts, and again, what do you need to work on if say you're trying to make the jump from a AA to AAA. If you have 2 or 4 weeks, you're probably not going to make a ton in terms of, skill improvement, but maybe your conditioning can be great. So you'll have a great weekend in terms of stamina. You can just make sure your hands and your shot feel good by doing some off ice things. And I think just, getting repetitions on the ice that you can, that again, kind of fit your identity as a player, and make sure you go into tryouts with confidence.
Gotcha. Okay, that's great. So you mentioned that normally for your tryouts, there's 3 tryout sessions. Is that typical across most clubs across the U.S.? Do you think that there's 3 on ice sessions?
Yeah, I would think so. We do a little bit of off ice testing as well, just to kind of gauge, where girls are at, because we'll retest at the end of summer, early fall. But we do a little bit of off ice testing and then 3 ice sessions. I think that's probably fairly normal from what I've seen just throughout the years. But I'm sure some clubs do things a little differently as well.
Gotcha. And so as far as the evaluation, do you do like a skill session where you actually, do some testing on ice skills like skating around pylons or speed or things like that? And how do you weigh that versus, their playing ability and their competing when they actually compete in scrimmages or games?
Yeah, I don't want to say we don't waste time on those things, but we choose not to do kind of the on ice testing. Because even if it's good to know how fast a kid can skate a lap or whatever, what do they do when it's a game? Like, does that speed show? Because you can have a really fast kid, but they look lost when they get into a game because they're out of position. They don't know how to use their speed. They're good at skating in a straight line, but when push comes to shove in a game, that basically gets negated really quick. So we don't spend pretty much any time on kind of those metrics. Again, we'll do some off ice testing just because we want to see that they put in work over the summer, and we'll retest in the fall. But in terms of those on ice metrics, we don't really do those. We focus a lot more on kind of skill. We want to see, ability to make tape to tape passes. We want to see decision making on a 2-on-1. Can you make a play, or can you defend a 2-on-1, 3-on-2, things like that. Do you battle? Do you compete? Do you compete till the whistle? Do you, we say stop at the net. Do you stop at the net? Those little habits. So I think we do a lot of things where, you see kids, you put them in positions where they have to make decisions and execute, and you just see who can do it most consistently. And I think that's the biggest thing, is we know kids will make mistakes. We're not expecting anyone to be perfect. And then, you see them make a mistake. Well, how do they bounce back? Do they get in their own head? Do they get down? Do they have bad body language? Or is it, okay, next rep, brush it off, I'll get right back, and then they go score a goal, or make a nice play. So I think those are the things we spend a lot on. So all our sessions are kind of focused around that.
And one of the key components that a former pro player told me, who's now a youth coach, said coachability is really important. So how would you judge coachability in a tryout?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a good point too. I think, if you're going to go up to a kid and give them feedback after a rep or something like that, do they kind of just look at you like, okay, like, or are they like, okay, or do they engage? Do they ask questions? I think kids, I think body language is so probably not talked about enough, but, or do they look attentive? Are they making eye contact? Things like that. I think those are all things that, again, we kind of look for. They're very subtle, but you kind of get a glimpse of, if kids make a good player, they tapping someone on the shin pads after a good rep and telling them good job. To try out, you can still tell other people nice job, even if you're competing for the same spot. So we really look for some things like that. And I think coachability, I think just, being receptive to feedback, whether it was, hey, you need to do this differently on this rep, and being like, okay, got it, or asking a question, or, hey, that was awesome, good job, okay, yep, I'll keep it up, So I think that's definitely some subtle things that we look for as well.
And then lastly, kind of on this evaluation topic, there are players who you see have real potential and they have future ability, like so if it's May and you go, okay, by January of next year, I see this person being a real, one of the top players on our team, but there's just raw talent now. There are other players who currently have better ability, but maybe not as much upside. How do you start picking between the two and deciding, which one you'd prefer?
Yeah, that's a good question. Definitely one where I'm sure everyone could debate a lot about. I think it really comes down to the kid that maybe you have, how old are they? Are they one of the younger ones on the team? Or are they one of the older ones on the team? And then, I think just, you want to be able to develop all kids, but does the kid with more raw talent, do they have more potential, more upside in the long run? And hey, do we have enough players that we feel have enough skill now to kind of get the team going and kind of bring that player with raw talent along as well? You don't want a team of all clones. You need some different types of styles, and you need kids to develop. So, we we definitely kind of look at that? Or is it just somebody that maybe lacks talent, but they're just such a hard worker and they'll set the standard and bring the culture of the team up? Maybe their talent will never kind of really hit that big upside, but are they just gonna be one of those players that we, is consistent, we can trust, they push the pace, they push others to be better. And then that, I remember this quote from high school, but a rising tide lifts all boats, right? Like, could that player just help bring other people up with them?
Gotcha. So now you're the parent of that kid who is clearly better than that other kid with potential, and you just cut my kid. How do you deal with the emotion of the parent and the kid who just got cut, who feels they should be on the team?
Yeah, I think with anything, we always tell people, give it 24, 48 hours, let the emotions set. Like, we're not going to ever have a conversation with someone right after we announce a team. Emotions are just too high anyway. So it's, hey, in a day or two, we can.
How do you announce the team? Actually, that would actually be helpful, because there are so many ways. There are emails, there are posting names, there are posting numbers, there's giving feedback, not giving, or not, I wouldn't say feedback, but hey, you made the team, hey, you didn't make the team in person. And then there's the more passive aggressive way of just posting it.
Yeah. And I've been part of all those. So I kind of totally get the feeling that, or dread sometimes that come with each of those. But for us, we will call the players, that their families or the individuals that will make the team. We'll talk to the kid directly, let them know they made it. For those that didn't, we'll send emails and offer the opportunity to provide feedback if they'd like it. So by setting up a call or finding some time at the rink, getting, an upcoming date, just because we think it's important. Again, we're looking to keep kids in our organization, obviously, and even if they didn't make our team this year, well, okay, they're still playing. We want them to make our team the following year, so we want to be able to provide that feedback and have some structure for them. So that's kind of the way we go about it. And in ours too, we won't, especially with our tryout dates having changed, but we won't actually pick all our team that first weekend. So we'll offer some spots. We'll ask some people to come back potentially to another weekend, and then kind of reevaluate them as well. So some kids might get more than one shot to make the team if they were like, we haven't seen enough yet, and we'll try and have that open communication with them as well.
Gotcha. So how can, parents, or especially kids, which is probably more important, how do the players take the life lessons from this experience, whether they do make it, whether they barely make it, whether they don't make it? You've seen it from all sides.
Yeah, I think one thing too, as coaches, we can have that conversation with kids before tryouts even start. Like, regardless of what happens this weekend, hockey doesn't define you. Whether you make it or not, we're still invested in your development as an organization. And then, I think, having that conversation early on just to get the kids thinking about it. And then I think, having conversations with kids that didn't make it. We actually, again, we're kind of that 16 to 19 age group. So kids should be able to kind of advocate for themselves a little bit more. So we'll have a conversation with feedback, like that'll be with the kid, and the parents can be there, but we're not just talking to the parents, we're talking to the kid. And so I think being able to also kind of remind them, again, sharing our own story. Like, I have plenty of experiences of feeling like you are right now, or whatever it may be, and just reminding them that use it as a tool, right? Use it as motivation, or just take it as a learning experience. I think one thing just we try to instill is that growth mindset in kids, and that's a perfect opportunity to do so, right? You're not going to make every team you try out for. We tell kids that right away. You're going to get cut at some point. It's inevitable, whether you play at this level or you play at the highest level, or you never make a national team, or you didn't get picked for the college you wanted to go to, whatever it may be. You're going to hear no at some point. So, okay, how can we help you kind of react to that and take it in stride?
Yeah, all they need to do is listen to any one of these podcasts that I've done with former USA hockey players, and every single one of them told about how eventually they got cut.
Yep,
So that's the situation. All right, maybe you could just talk about actually the stress and anxiety on your side of things, picking teams. Like people think like, oh yeah, like they just focus on their kid or the player just focus on themselves. But there's a lot of emotion that goes on your side of things, just trying to figure out who to pick, and even talking amongst the coaches, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think as a coach, I'm looking at a player a little bit differently than another coach is looking at that same player. So we're looking at different, I think they're, good in this area and they don't, so it's kind of having those kind of healthy debates and conversations. And ultimately, again, remember, we're talking about kids, right? Like, we're not in the NHL here. So, we're not whatever, but we want the kids to develop. So I think it's, talking about what we feel they are as a player, and, where we think they handle the commitment level that we're going to require in terms of maturity. And then I think, making sure that they're going to be put in a position where they can have success. We'll never pick a kid and just have them sit on the bench the entire year. Like, what do they get out of that? They should have just played on a different team. We want to be honest with kids about that too, of like, sometimes it's for the best that you don't make the team this year, which is hard to grasp in that moment. Like, right, you're pretty much zoned out the second you say, hey, not this year. But I think just being able to have healthy discussions around where we think kids will flourish and where we think they'll continue to develop. And again, a lot of that comes with putting them in positions to succeed. And so sometimes that's where kind of the debates go, and you just want to do right by kids. So if anything, that's where kind of the stress comes from, is you want to put kids in the right position. And will they always agree with it? Probably not, but you want to try and do right by the kids.
Great. Okay, one last thing for tryouts. Any last piece of advice for a player who's starting to prepare?
I think I don't know. I encourage kids to go out and try and be the best player on the ice. Someone's got to be the best player, so why not you? And so and I think just show that you're a good teammate, and the little details, back check, pressure the puck, stick on the ice. All these little things that I think people think we just look who can score goals, but yeah, well, what were the 10 things you did or didn't do before you even got the puck? So I think really kind of focusing on those little details and then just kind of going with confidence.
That's awesome. All right. So how can kids, if they happen to be in your area or potentially thinking about, building and moving to a 19 AAA team, how can they learn more about the Junior Canes Girls program and the Premier program that you have kicking off this year?
Yeah. It's juniorcanesgirls.com is our organization website. But yeah, we're, it's kind of fun because for so long, girls down here got to age 14 or 15 and they left, right? You had to, because there was no good competitive option. So you go to prep school, you go to a Northeast program, you go wherever. And so this program was designed to be able to just offer an option to stay local. We modeled it after we actually modeled after the junior boys program. So we have our own locker room. We practice 4 days a week. We have 2 off-ice sessions with the professional strength coaches that work with the NC Courage, which is the women's professional soccer team. We do video sessions, individual video, and just really, prioritizing development and helping try and get kids to that next level, which is, college hockey for a lot of them.
That's awesome. And you also have something called AG2. You want to talk about that for a moment?
Yeah. AG2 hockey was, I started a couple years ago and I finished playing. And at first it was really just kind of a way when actually I was still playing up in Boston. And I would come back and be able to, run camps and clinics and things like that. And specifically girls only. There was there's never girls only hockey camps or options down here. So would be able to run some of those, and now do a lot of kind of like private skills and things like that, which I really enjoy that aspect of it, the kind of small group skills.
And what's the website for that if folks want to learn more?
Yeah, ag2hockey.com.
Perfect. All right, Alyssa, thank you so much. This is great.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
I want to thank Alyssa for coming on the podcast. She shared some great insights on planning for tryouts, so I hope you got something out of it, and we wish you the best of luck this upcoming tryout season. And remember, if you got something out of today's episode, we'd really appreciate it if you'd like, follow, subscribe, and even better if you could leave us a review, so we can keep sharing this important hockey information with folks just like you.